The hum of the office printer was the first sound I heard that morning. It always started before the lights came fully on, spitting out reports nobody read anymore. The air smelled like burnt toner and stale coffee, and that sound always told me the day was about to ask too much again. I set my mug on my desk and waited for the machine to stop. On the other side of the cubicle wall, people were trickling in. The usual Monday voices, half-awake greetings, chair wheels squeaking, someone asking if the Wi-Fi was down. Nothing felt different until I saw the new nameplate being pinned up across from mine, Evan Carter. At first, I didn't even register it. New hires came and went all the time, especially in data operations. But then I saw the title under his name, Data Analyst 2, my title. That's when the memory kicked in, the one from a few weeks earlier when I'd shared my resume with a friend who said his buddy was looking for a layout example. I hadn't thought twice about it. We'd been in the same college circle. I even gave him tips on formatting, how to phrase achievements in a way that sounds confident without bragging. Turns out, I'd written his job pitch for him, and now he was here. He walked in with a coffee in one hand and a grin like he already knew everyone. Same company badge hanging from his neck. Same tone I used to use when I still thought working hard got you somewhere. When he spotted me, he didn't flinch. "Hey, man," he said, cheerful, friendly, as if we were running into each other at a campus bar. "Didn't expect to see you here." My voice came out flat. "Apparently we're teammates now." He laughed, the kind of laugh that fills in the silence without meaning to. Then he looked at my monitor. "Guess I'll be shadowing you for the first week. HR said you're the lead on the reporting systems?" I nodded, though inside it felt like a small wire had snapped. Later, during our morning sync, my manager, Laura, introduced him to the team. She said something about how great it was to have another skilled analyst on board. "Evan brings some strong experience," she said, "especially in workflow optimization." That last phrase hit like static. It was word for word from the resume I'd written. My phrasing, my bullet point, my voice. He looked over at me again and smiled. I didn't smile back. When the meeting ended, I went to refill my coffee. He followed. "You've been here, what, 3 years?" he asked, stirring sugar into his cup like he had all the time in the world. "4," I said. "Nice. Maybe you can show me the ropes. You seem like the guy who knows how things really work around here." It wasn't the words that bothered me. It was the tone. Like he'd already skipped the part where he should feel grateful. I told him I'd send over some documentation. He said, "Cool, but I learn better hands-on." Of course he did. The first week went by, slower than usual. He asked questions that weren't really questions, more like tests. He'd hover near my desk, pretending to follow along while I walked him through scripts I'd written from scratch over years. He'd jot notes on a tablet, never looking up. One afternoon, I caught him opening one of my folders, the one marked Internal Tools. He said he was just exploring. I said it was restricted. He apologized quickly, but not in a way that felt sincere. By Friday, Laura was praising him for how fast he'd picked things up. I sat through the meeting watching him nod along, and every nod felt like an echo of something I'd already done. That night, I stayed late. The office emptied out around 9, lights dimming row by row. I opened my folder logs. Sure enough, there were timestamps showing activity from his login earlier that day. Not just internal tools. He'd opened automation scripts, client reports, and the project folder I'd been building for months. I took screenshots. My stomach tightened. I thought about reporting it to Laura, but then I remembered how new hire enthusiasm always gets the benefit of the doubt. I'd sound territorial, insecure, paranoid. Instead, I decided to wait. The following Monday, he showed up early, same as me. This time, he brought 2 coffees. "Peace offering," he said, handing me one. I took it. It tasted like cardboard and sugar. So Laura wants me to handle the Phoenix account reporting, so he said. Said you could walk me through the setup. That was my project. My baby. I'd built every macro, every parameter for that system. It wasn't just data. It was years of my time disguised as code. I swallowed my frustration and opened the dashboard. Fine, I said. Let's go over it. For the next hour, I explained every layer of the logic, every dependency, every hidden catch that could break the output. He listened, nodded, even asked thoughtful questions. But halfway through, I realized he wasn't writing anything down. He didn't need to. He'd already read it all. When we finished, he leaned back. Man, this stuff's impressive, he said. I can see why they trust you with it. The compliment should have felt good. It didn't. By midweek, he was presenting his first report. Laura clapped at the end. Fantastic work, Evan, she said. You really hit the ground running. He thanked her modestly, but I noticed the spreadsheet tab names on the projector. They were mine. Every label, every formula shorthand, even the color codes. He hadn't even changed the names. After the meeting, I stopped him in the hallway. You used my templates, he shrugged. You said they were company property, not the personal macros. Oh, come on, man. You act like I'm stealing fire from the gods. It's just data. It's not just data. Then maybe you should have locked your folders. The sentence hit me like a slap. I didn't answer. He walked off, humming, as if he'd won something I hadn't realized was a competition. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my resume, the same one he'd copied. Same words, same achievements, except the difference was that they believed him. I thought about rewriting it again, this time shorter, blunter. No polish, just truth, knows too much. Trains people who take credit for his work. Still shows up anyway, but I didn't. I closed the document and stared at the reflection in my monitor instead. I looked tired, older than 32. My eyes had that dull, office light fatigue that doesn't go away with sleep. I opened my email and drafted one to HR, but I couldn't bring myself to send it. Instead, I saved it as a draft and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the nameplate across from mine, the one that used to be just a blank wall. The next morning, something small shifted. Laura called me into her office. She asked how the handover with Evan was going. Fine, I said, careful, neutral. She tilted her head. He mentioned he's already optimizing some of your scripts, said he found redundancies. My chest went cold. Redundancies? She nodded. I haven't seen the changes yet, but if he can make them faster, that's a win for everyone, right? I wanted to say that he didn't understand the data dependencies, that changing one link could break the entire chain, but I knew how that would sound. Defensive, emotional. So I said, sure, a win for everyone. When I stepped out, he was waiting by the copier with that same grin. She talked to you yet? He asked. Yeah. Good. I told her we make a good team. Team. That word landed heavier than it should have. By Friday, one of his optimizations crashed a live report. A minor error, but enough for the client to call. Laura called me in to fix it, and I spent 2 hours cleaning up his mess. When it was done, she said, "Thanks, Alex. I'll have a word with him about testing." But the next day, he was still there, still grinning, still humming that same little tune as he typed. It wasn't just frustration anymore. It was something quieter, a steady kind of anger that doesn't show up on your face but lodges somewhere deep. That weekend, I printed out all the version histories, the file logs, and my original code backups. I didn't know yet what I'd do with them, but I knew I wasn't going to just watch him climb over me. Maybe that's when the idea first started forming. Not revenge exactly, but balance. Because if someone steals your work and calls it his own, maybe the only fair thing to do is make him prove he actually knows what he's doing. And I had just the way to find out. The office was quieter on Mondays after a crash week. People spoke softly, avoiding eye contact, as if productivity could smell fear. I came in early again, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop thinking about that file he broke, the one I had to fix. My plan wasn't a plan yet. It was more like an itch. I told myself I just wanted to see what he'd do next, whether the failure had humbled him or just made him more careful. He showed up 10 minutes later, humming under his breath, wearing a new watch. Probably bought it after his first paycheck. He waved like we were old friends. "Morning, partner." "Morning," I said. He leaned against my cubicle wall. "So I've been thinking about how we can streamline the Phoenix workflows. I'll take a crack at those automation rules again." I turned in my chair slowly. "You mean the ones that crashed the report?" He smirked. "Glitches happen. That's how innovation works." The arrogance of it was almost fascinating, like watching someone light a match near a gas leak and call it progress. "Sure," I said. "Go ahead. But let's do something first. Run through your version logic. To make sure we're aligned." He didn't catch the trap. "Yeah, definitely. I've got a good handle on it," he said. "Give me an hour, then we'll sync." Perfect. At 9:30, we sat in the small meeting room with a whiteboard and a cracked dry erase marker that never worked. I handed him the marker anyway. "Walk me through your logic for the automation trigger." He started writing boxes and arrows like he was back in school. But halfway through, he hesitated. I could almost see the gap open in his head, the place where he'd memorized results instead of understanding them. "So the conditional is, he frowned. "When the batch completes, it runs the next macro?" "Which macro?" I asked. He looked at the board. "The report generator? That's not what triggers it." He blinked. "Isn't it?" "No." He erased a line, then another. The squeak of the marker filled the silence. "Look, maybe I mixed up one of your earlier scripts," he said. "They're not exactly user-friendly." I kept my voice level. "That's because they weren't written for users. They were written for analysts." His jaw flexed, a small twitch he couldn't hide. For the first time, he didn't have something slick to say. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll document everything. Wouldn't want the new guy to get lost." By lunch, word had spread that I'd grilled him in the meeting. I didn't deny it. People laughed in quiet, guilty bursts. It was the kind of office laughter that hides behind coffee cups. Later that day, Laura called me in again. "Alex, I heard there was some tension in your training session." "Tension?" I asked. She folded her hands. Evan felt the tone was condescending. I almost laughed. He didn't know what he was doing. "I understand, but he's still onboarding. We want this to be a collaborative environment." Collaborative. Another word that sounds positive until it's used to keep people quiet. "I'll keep that in mind, Ita," I said. "Good." She smiled that corporate smile that ends meetings. "You're a great asset here, Alex. I just want to make sure you and Evan start off on the right foot." The right foot. Sure. His foot was already on my neck. That night, I didn't go home right away. I stayed late again, checking logs, watching how he moved through the system. Every keystroke left a breadcrumb. He'd been poking around the automation scripts again, opening them, closing them, then copying lines of code into his own directory. He wasn't learning. He was harvesting. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I built a ghost script. It looked normal on the surface, identical to the others, same file name format, but inside, it was wired to break in a very specific way, only when you removed a comment line that looked useless. It was a trap I used to test interns. Except this time, I didn't plan to warn him. I placed it in the shared folder under a plausible name, Q4 Clean Archive. By the next morning, he'd taken it. It happened on Wednesday. I was in the break room when Laura's voice came through the intercom, calm but clipped. Can everyone save their work immediately? We're experiencing a system fault. I walked back to my desk, heart steady. Evan was already there, typing fast. His face was pale. What happened? I asked. Something's wrong with the archive routine, he said. It's deleting intermediate files. That's impossible. He looked up, panicked. I just ran the cleanup script, and now the staging data's gone. The ghost script. He'd taken the bait. Which one? I asked. The Q4 clean archive, the one you left in the shared folder. Oh, that one. I opened my folder casually. Did you remove any comments from it? He hesitated. They looked redundant. They weren't. I let the silence sit. Around us, the team was murmuring, backups being restored, IT messages popping up. The damage wasn't catastrophic, but it was visible. Enough to be noticed. Enough for Laura to come running. What happened here? She asked. Evan jumped in first. I was cleaning up old files, and one of Alex's scripts malfunctioned. My turn. It didn't malfunction. It was modified. Her eyes moved between us. Modified how? Someone deleted a protected comment header that contained a safety gate. The script ran a full purge. Evan stammered. That's ridiculous. Why would anyone write code that breaks itself? To stop people from stealing it, I said. The room went still. The next few hours blurred. It confirmed my version of the script was clean. Logs showed his user ID executing the modified one. Laura looked tense. Caught between two people she didn't want to choose between. By evening, the system was restored. No lasting damage, but reputations don't restore as easily. He avoided me for the rest of the week. I didn't rub it in. I didn't need to. People had started whispering. Not loud, not cruel, just the way offices whisper when they sense weakness. He still came to meetings, still smiled too much, still tried to sound confident. But something in his tone had shifted, a tiny crack in the smoothness. That should have been enough, but it wasn't. A few weeks later, he started to rebuild his standing. Laura gave him smaller tasks, and he completed them cleanly. He stayed late, played humble, laughed louder than anyone else. It worked. People forgot. Except me. One Friday, as I was leaving, I saw him talking to someone from corporate communications. He was handing over something on a flash drive. They shook hands. I didn't think much of it until the next Monday when an email went out from the VP's office. Congratulations to Evan Carter for his initiative in streamlining internal documentation. Attached was a PDF, Best Practices for Workflow Efficiency. I opened it. It was my documentation. The same guide I'd written years ago for new analysts. He'd rebranded it, renamed it, and put his name on the title page. That's when I realized he wasn't just copying work. He was building a career out of it. I didn't explode. I didn't storm into anyone's office. I just closed my laptop and went for a walk outside. The air was sharp with early winter cold, and I could feel it bite through my sleeves. People passed by holding phones, coffee cups, conversations. I thought about all the hours I'd spent trying to be reliable, steady, reasonable, the kind of employee who never made waves. And what had that earned me? A seat across from the man who'd used my words, my code, and my name to climb a ladder I built. When I got back, I opened my email and started typing again. This time, I didn't save it as a draft. Hi, Laura. I need to report a case of intellectual property misuse and misrepresentation. I have documentation to support this. I attached the logs, the ghost script reports, and a copy of my original documentation drafts from 2 years back. Then I hit send. It felt like pressing a reset button I didn't know existed. The next morning, HR called me in. The conference room smelled like disinfectant and coffee. Laura was there, along with a woman from HR named Denise. "Alex," Denise began, "we've reviewed your email. Can you walk us through what happened?" I laid it out. The resume, the copied files, the ghost script, the documentation. I didn't embellish. I didn't accuse. I just told it straight. When I finished, Laura's face was unreadable. Denise nodded slowly. "This is serious," she said. "We'll need to speak with Evan and verify your materials." "Of course," I said. Walking out of that room, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. Because even if I proved everything, it wouldn't change the months I'd spent being quiet, while someone else got credit for my work. It wouldn't give back the self-respect I'd traded for professionalism. But at least now it was on record, and that meant something. That Friday, HR sent out a calendar block for a follow-up meeting. Evan's name was on the invite. So was mine. When I got there, he was already seated, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't look confident anymore. Denise began. "Evan, we've reviewed the claims. The evidence supports that several of your deliverables contained work authored by Alex prior to your employment here. Do you have anything to say?" He shifted in his chair. "Look, everyone reuses materials. It's part of the job. I didn't steal anything." Denise's tone stayed calm. "Did you or did you not present documentation originally written by Alex as your own work to corporate communications?" He hesitated. "Maybe I used his framework, but I rewrote it." Laura slid a printed copy across the table. "These documents are identical, even the typos." He said nothing. Denise leaned forward. "Given the circumstances, we're issuing a formal warning and suspending your access to shared drives until further notice." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, watching the same man who once strutted in with my resume now struggling to hold eye contact. When the meeting ended, he stood up slowly. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "You could have talked to me." "I did," I said. "You just didn't listen." That night I stayed late again, not because I had to, but because the quiet felt earned this time. I looked across the empty cubicle where his nameplate had already been taken down. For the first time in months, the office didn't feel smaller. It felt like space was finally clearing. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because men like him don't disappear. They resurface. And when he did, I planned to be ready. It took almost 3 weeks before the office felt normal again. Or at least, something close to normal. Evan didn't return after his suspension, and no one said the word fired, but his badge stopped working. That's how you know around here. When someone's ID no longer flashes green at the door, they stop existing. Still, his shadow hung around. People were careful when they asked about him. Some pretended not to know what had happened. Others whispered that maybe I'd gone too far, that HR didn't have to be involved. Nobody said it to my face, but I heard it in the silences that followed when I entered a room. Laura tried to smooth things over. "Let's move forward," she said during one of our team meetings, her voice overly light. "We've all learned a few lessons about documentation integrity." The word integrity hung in the air like disinfectant. I nodded and went back to my keyboard. But moving forward didn't come easy. I'd spent months trying to prove I wasn't paranoid. And now that I'd been proven right, I felt drained instead of vindicated. That's what nobody tells you about justice. It doesn't feel clean. It leaves a residue. Around that time, I started getting messages from recruiters on LinkedIn. Someone must have circulated the internal memo about the incident, and suddenly, I was being described as the guy who caught a plagiarist. One recruiter even called me a quiet hero. It didn't feel like heroism. It felt like survival. Still, I answered a few of them. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I wanted to know what it would sound like if someone else valued my work again. I updated my profile, reworded my bio, and stared for too long at the blank space where career highlights should go. When I finally wrote something, it wasn't about titles or certifications. It was one line. Believes good work speaks for itself, even when others try to steal the voice. I clicked save and shut my laptop. A week later, I got a calendar invite from Laura for a team restructuring discussion. That's never a good sign. When I joined the call, the HR rep was there too. Denise again. Laura started. Corporate wants to expand the analytics division. They're asking me to recommend someone for a new senior position. You're the obvious choice, Alex. For a second, I didn't breathe. Then she added, but given how the last few months played out, I need to be transparent. There's some concern from upper management about the tension that happened. Tension, I repeated. They don't want drama. I almost laughed. So protecting my work is drama now? Denise interjected, calm as ever. They're not questioning your actions, Alex, but leadership roles require diplomacy. They want to make sure you can manage conflict without escalation. The words slid around politely, but I heard what they meant. You were right, but you weren't quiet enough about it. I can be diplomatic, I said finally. I've been diplomatic for years. Laura nodded. Good. Then let's show them that. The promotion didn't come right away, but they gave me a raise. A quiet one, no announcement, no email. It showed up on my pay stub one Friday morning like a secret apology. I didn't celebrate. That weekend, I drove out of the city for the first time in months. I stopped at a gas station on the interstate, grabbed a coffee that tasted like burnt plastic, and sat on the hood of my car watching trucks roll past. I didn't think about Evan or Laura or HR. I thought about my dad. He used to work in manufacturing, spent 30 years at the same plant until automation took over. He never complained. He said something once that didn't make sense to me back then. If you teach someone your craft, make sure they learn your respect with it. Now, I understood what he meant. When I returned on Monday, a new analyst had joined the team, younger than Evan, maybe mid-20s. Her name was Leah. She introduced herself with a firm handshake and an open notebook. Laura said you'd show me around the systems, she said. I smiled, though part of me hesitated. Sure, welcome aboard. She was sharp, the kind of person who took notes and asked questions that mattered. Within a few days, she was navigating the dashboards like she'd built them herself. I caught myself holding back, double-checking what I shared. Not because she gave me any reason to distrust her, but because I still carried that instinct to guard everything. She noticed. You keep watching the screen when I type, she said one afternoon, smiling. You think I'm going to break something? I almost apologized, but honesty won out. The last person I trained used my work against me. She blinked. Seriously? Yeah. Then I'll make sure you never regret training me. Something in her tone cut through the cynicism I'd built. Maybe it was just kindness, but it felt like something heavier, like trust, earned slowly. Weeks passed. The office found its rhythm again. Evan became an unspoken story, like an old rumor everyone pretends not to remember. Then, one night as I was leaving, I got a text from an unknown number. Hoped the raise was worth it. No name, no context, but I knew who it was. Evan. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. There was no threat in the message, just a bitterness that somehow felt worse. I didn't reply. The next morning, I found a LinkedIn notification. Evan Carter has started a new position at Rentech Analytics, a rival firm, same city, higher title, senior data specialist. I clicked through to his profile. His summary was practically lifted from mine. The same phrasing about building integrity-driven solutions, the same project references, with company names swapped out. The rage that hit wasn't loud. It was quiet, concentrated, like a pulse behind my eyes. I closed the tab and sat back. Part of me wanted to let it go. Another part whispered that this wasn't over, not if he was still using my work as his foundation. That's when I had another idea. Not revenge, just truth, again. Rentech had a public repository for shared code samples. I checked their website, scrolled through the latest posts, and there it was. Evan Carter, listed as contributor on a data cleaning package. I downloaded it, opened the files, and almost laughed. He'd copied my old automation script again, line for line, including the commented sections, including my initials buried in the code header. He hadn't even noticed them. I didn't need to report it to HR this time. I sent a polite professional email to Rentech's compliance department, attached the evidence. Hello, I believe one of your employees may have submitted intellectual property belonging to my organization. Please find the original creation dates and ownership records attached. Best, Alex Morgan. I didn't expect a reply. But 2 days later, they wrote back. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We are investigating the matter and appreciate your discretion. That was all. Short, formal, but final enough. A week later, Leah stopped by my desk. You look lighter, she said. I shrugged. Just tying up loose ends. She grinned. That's what good analysts do. For the first time in months, I laughed without forcing it. The closure I'd wanted didn't arrive in fireworks. It came in small moments. The silence after finishing a task, the absence of tension in my shoulders, the knowledge that I'd stood up for myself the right way. There was no public apology, no office party, no moral victory speech, just balance, quiet and steady. Still, late at night, sometimes I thought about Evan. I wondered if he ever felt that same hollow pause I used to feel, the one between ambition and guilt. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he never would. But at least the story wasn't his anymore. It was mine again. And I wasn't going to let anyone rewrite it. The email from Rentech faded into memory faster than I expected. For the first time in months, I wasn't waking up with a clenched jaw or running conversations through my head before walking into work. The fight had left me, replaced by something calmer, quieter. Leah settled into the team like she'd been there for years. She worked with precision, never cutting corners, always asking before changing a file. Watching her work made me realize how tense I'd become, how I'd been holding every shared folder like a secret I might lose. One afternoon, she leaned over my desk. You ever think about managing a team? I almost laughed. That's what I do now, unofficially. I mean for real, she said. Title and all. You've been the one keeping this place running. I shrugged. Titles don't fix anything. She smiled. Maybe not, but they give you room to make things better. That line stayed with me longer than I expected. By spring, the company started a new mentorship program. Laura asked if I'd lead it. You're steady, she said. And after everything, you're the one people actually trust. The irony wasn't lost on me, that the guy who'd been burned by teaching was now being asked to teach others again. But maybe that was exactly why I should. I said yes. The first session had 6 analysts, all new faces. I watched them file into the small conference room with notebooks and laptops, eager and nervous. One of them, a kid named Brian, couldn't have been older than 24. He reminded me of myself before the cynicism set in. Curious, careful, trying too hard not to look like he cared too much. First rule, Bem, I told them, never rush your understanding just to look smart. People remember who gets it right, not who speaks first. They nodded, some scribbling notes. Second rule, I said, document everything. Not to protect yourself, but to protect your work. Those are different things. Leah, who joined me as co-trainer, added, and third rule, if someone teaches you something, respect the time it took them to learn it. Her eyes met mine for half a second. The room was quiet. That was the moment I realized the loop had closed. I wasn't just trying to undo what Evan had done. I was replacing it with something better. A few weeks later, I got a message from Denise in HR. She said she wanted to touch base about a former employee. I knew who before she said his name. Evan Carter, she said. He reached out, asked for an employment verification letter. I leaned back. You're kidding. She smiled faintly. We're only confirming dates of employment. Nothing more. I thought you'd want to know. I did. Not out of spite, but out of curiosity. The kind that comes from wanting to understand what drives a person like him. Did he say where he's working now? I asked. Freelancing, apparently. Consulting for smaller firms. Claims he's focusing on independent projects. I nodded slowly. That sounded about right. Still trying to sell borrowed words as innovation. When the call ended, I sat for a while staring at the city through the window. It was almost sunset, the glass catching streaks of orange and gold. I wondered if he ever looked at his own reflection and saw the same exhaustion I'd once felt. The cost of pretending to be someone you hadn't earned the right to be. Summer came quietly. My team grew. Leah got promoted to lead analyst, and I made a point of nominating her myself. She deserved it. She reminded me that trust wasn't weakness. It was risk with purpose. We'd sometimes talk after work, when the office emptied out and the machines clicked softly in sleep mode. One night she asked, if you could go back, would you do anything differently? I thought about that for a long time. I'd speak up sooner, I said finally. Not because it would have changed what happened, but because silence gives people permission to keep crossing lines. She nodded. And if it meant losing your job, then at least I'd lose it as myself. There was no drama in my voice, no bitterness, just truth that had been earned the hard way. That fall, I got an email from a Rentec contact. It wasn't about Evan. It was about me. Alex, we're expanding our senior analytics team. Your name came highly recommended. Would you be open to a conversation? For a moment, I just stared at the message. The same company where Evan had crashed and burned now wanted me. I didn't even know who had recommended me, but I could guess. Someone must have remembered how that investigation turned out. I met with them 2 weeks later. The office was sleek, modern, too many glass walls and polished surfaces. The interviewer, a middle-aged woman named Carla, had a calm voice and sharp eyes. We're not just hiring for skill, she said. We're looking for someone who values integrity. I heard you understand that better than most. I smiled faintly. I've had practice. By the end of the week, they sent an offer. Senior data architect. Better pay, better resources, clean slate. I accepted. My last day at my old job felt strangely quiet. Laura shook my hand. Leah hugged me. The rest of the team clapped in that polite, slightly awkward way offices do when someone leaves but no one knows how to express real gratitude in public. As I packed up, Leah handed me a note folded into a square. For later, she said. I didn't open it until I got home. Inside, in her careful handwriting, were 6 words. You made honesty look like strength. I sat there for a long time, reading it over and over. Starting at Rentec felt surreal. Everything was new but familiar. Systems I recognized, procedures I once built elsewhere. The ghosts of my work scattered across different folders, echoes of a time when my name wasn't attached. But this time, I wasn't here to reclaim the past. I was here to build forward. The first day, Carla walked me through the project I'd be leading. It involved rebuilding an internal tool, one I immediately recognized as a cleaned-up version of my old Phoenix script. She noticed my expression. You've seen this before? I smiled. Something like it? She nodded. Well, I'd love for you to make it better, your way. That simple phrase, your way, carried more weight than she knew. Over the next few months, I rebuilt the system from the ground up. This time, I documented everything in plain language, added credit lines for every contributor, and left nothing ambiguous. It wasn't about ownership anymore. It was about legacy. When the final version went live, I added one note to the header comment. Originally developed in collaboration with internal teams across multiple organizations, rebuilt with gratitude and integrity. No initials, no signatures, just truth. And when the first test ran clean, when the numbers lined up perfectly across the dashboard, I leaned back and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Pride. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing you rebuilt something broken. And this time it couldn't be taken from you. Later that night, I got another email. No name in the sender field, just an address I didn't recognize. Nice work on Phoenix 2.0. Maybe I should have learned from you instead of trying to be you. No signature. I didn't need one. I read it twice, then closed the laptop. Some lessons arrive late. Some people only learn them when there's nothing left to take. I never replied to that last email. There was nothing left to say. Maybe a few years ago, I would have written something sharp or moral, tried to make him understand the damage he'd done. But now, I just didn't need him to. Understanding wasn't my job anymore. He'd finally said something true, and that was enough. Rentech became the kind of place I'd always imagined working for. The culture wasn't perfect, but people listened. The first project I led got recognized internally, not for its complexity, but because it ran clean for 3 months straight with zero downtime. That was the quiet kind of success I liked. The kind no one celebrated with balloons, but everyone trusted. Carla promoted me officially to team lead in January. You make people better without making them feel small, she said. I didn't realize how much I'd needed to hear that until that moment. Leah sent me a message the next week, a selfie of her new office badge, the one with manager under her name. Your turn to buy coffee, she wrote. I smiled and replied, Deal, you're paying next time. Months passed. Life evened out. I started waking up without dread again. I started leaving my phone on the table without checking it every hour. Some nights, I'd take the long way home just to watch the city lights flicker against the river. I learned that peace isn't a prize. It's a decision. You stop feeding the parts of yourself that need someone else to lose for you to feel whole. Still, sometimes when I walked past the mirror in my office, I'd think about that first morning. The nameplate, the grin, the voice that said partner like it meant something different. It felt distant now, like someone else's story entirely. Maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting what happened, but no longer flinching when you remember. One Friday, HR asked me to guest speak at a professional development workshop. The topic was workplace integrity and ownership. I almost said no. The irony felt too heavy. But Carla insisted. You don't have to tell the story, she said. Just tell the truth. So I did. I stood in front of 20 new hires, none of them knowing what had brought me there, and I said, you're going to spend a lot of time learning how to be efficient, accurate, and fast. That's good. But don't forget that the work you do carries your name, whether it's visible or not. Protect that name by being the kind of person you'd want to see it attached to. There was silence when I finished. The kind of silence that comes from people listening, not out of obligation, but because something landed. Afterward, one of the new hires came up to me. He said, I've been nervous about starting here. Hearing that made it feel like it actually matters who you are. It hit me harder than I expected, because once I'd needed to hear that too. A few months later, I ran into Laura at a conference downtown. She looked surprised to see me. Alex, wow, Rentech suits you. Thanks, I said. She hesitated. I heard about Evan, you know. He reached out to me a while back, wanted a reference for a government contract. I raised an eyebrow. Did you give him one? She shook her head. No, I told him to list the projects he actually worked on. For the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of accountability in someone else's eyes. Good, I said. We parted with polite small talk, but as I walked away, I realized I didn't feel resentment anymore. Just distance. Clean, necessary distance. By late summer, the mentorship program I'd built at Rentec had doubled in size. We had 20 participants, each assigned to a senior mentor. During one session, I caught a glimpse of a document one of the new analysts had written. At the bottom of the file, he'd credited me for the original framework. It was a small thing, maybe trivial to anyone else, but to me, it was proof that the cycle had changed. That respect could ripple forward the same way theft once had. On my 2-year anniversary at Rentec, Carla stopped by my desk. You know, she said, there's a new internal award they're creating, Integrity and Leadership. I'd like to nominate you. I laughed softly. That's too poetic. She smiled. You've earned it. When she left, I looked out the window again. The skyline was changing. New towers, old ones fading in reflection. Everything keeps moving, even when you're still. I thought about the man I used to be, tired, defensive, quietly furious. Then about the man who replaced him, the one who learned that justice isn't about getting even. It's about reclaiming your time. I closed my laptop, shut off the desk lamp, and let the dark office hum settle around me. It felt like the right kind of quiet this time. That night, before heading to bed, I opened my inbox one last time. There was a new message with the subject line, "Thanks for the talk." It was from Brian, the young analyst I'd mentored years ago. He wrote, I just wanted to say your session changed how I see work. I used to think keeping your head down was the same as being professional. Now I know it's about standing up the right way. I read it twice, smiling without meaning to. The lesson had finally completed its loop. Some stories don't end with fireworks. They end with someone finally being seen for who they were all along. And for the first time since this all began, that felt like enough. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.